What's going on, guys? We are back on the Bible and Business podcast. Today we have Royce. Um, Royce is a discipleship pastor at a church here in Olathe, Kansas. He's been in business for some time, and also he was a part of the fitness industry. So, you want to fill him in on kind of what you're doing?
Oh man, it's been a long ride, a lot of fun. So currently, my family and I have been serving at our church for going on 17 years here. We served at a church in Texas for a little bit before we moved up here, and just filled in where needed and had a little bit of gifting, and then one thing kind of led to another, and became the youth pastor a little over a decade ago. Then I became the family ministries pastor, and now I'm the discipleship pastor. And so just taking it one step at a time, seeing what the Lord wants to do, and putting one foot in front of the other, man. That's kind of there's a lot more to it than that in ways, but that's kind of the main thing. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, man, so you've been doing it a lot longer than I thought you were in ministry.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up in church,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't start actually going to church till I was 21. I got pretty radically saved. We might get into that at some point, but I don't know. Got really radically saved when I was 21. Just kind of a me and Jesus in the
Mm-hmm.
upstairs bedroom of an apartment kind of a thing, and started getting into church. I had a public speaking background at the time. I had done some recruiting seminars for a company that I worked for, and so I was kind of used to that, and got thrown into a pulpit pretty quickly, way too early to be honest. And then when I moved up here, started just went through a formal leadership development with my pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and just served, man, and always had. I say I had a heart for it, but really what it was I didn't want to go to church
Mm.
when I got saved. I had this really interesting perspective on the church. I grew up in North Texas. A lot of the Christians that I knew were more cultural Christians than actual cross-carrying Christians. And so they just kind of went through the paces, and it looked really ugly to me from the outside looking in, because I don't tend to trust people who aren't about their business.
Mm.
And the more important your business is, the more important it is to be about your business. And I couldn't equate to do people actually believe in the God that they profess to believe in and have such a small practical faith. And so I just didn't trust it. And therefore I didn't want to be involved in church. In the way that I prayed about it was, Lord, I already have one dysfunctional family. I don't need another one. And and he was very clear with me. He just essentially said, if you know better, go be better. And so that was my call to ministry, I guess.
Wow.
And along the way, I learned that I didn't really know better in some ways, and then I learned in some ways I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody has that perspective. And I know that a lot of people like to sit back and complain. And I really just don't have a whole lot of tolerance for complaints if you're not willing to jump in and do something to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just jumped in and, worked with teenagers for a really long time, and did, youth group stuff. And, probably all my students would say that I did youth group stuff way different than most people, because I kind of took that same energy
Mm-hmm.
just with young people,
Yeah.
where it's like, hey, if you're going to be honest, and you're really going to do this, like really do it.
Mm-hmm.
And always took discipleship very seriously. Always took, and I say seriously, like I just don't know how to switch it off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where the lines get blurred. We'll talk about that as we talk about business, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just don't see where there's a dividing line between what life is supposed to be and what we're called to do, or how to compartmentalize those things necessarily. So it all just kind of became one thing to me, and so I always tried to impress that onto students, and then that eventually led to doing life with parents,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then it just kind of progressed from there. But it's like I said, yeah, it's a long journey. It's been 17 years that me and my wife have been on the ground actually doing that. And, but it's just been one step at a time. It's just been one foot in front of the other.
Wow, that's that's crazy. What? So why would your students say you did it differently? Like, go into that.
I don't really know, man. Like, I'm just me,
Yeah.
and I really don't apologize for what that means. I think it's an interesting kind of dichotomy that we as people, and I think especially as men, kind of live in. There's a lot of pressure that's thrown on just humans in general
Mm-hmm.
in their own ways. But, as a husband and as a father and as a leader, I've always tried to strike the balance of being humble, right? I think we're only as good as our willingness to learn. You're not willing to learn if you don't really embrace humility. We're kind of, I think culturally, and I think as, especially as a young man, finding the line between arrogance and confidence was a little bit tricky, I guess. But once I really kind of figured out how to embrace genuine confidence and not question, like, who am I,
Mm-hmm.
and really finding my identity, um, that became such a space of confidence to where I can listen to you if you disagree with me. I can hear you,
Mm-hmm.
and I can humble myself
Mm-hmm.
to learn and to therefore grow and be better. But ultimately, striking that balance of your opinion doesn't define me
Mm-hmm.
became a central ethos to my life. And I think because of that, I don't really look around a lot to see what someone else is doing. Um, it can matter. Success leaves clues, right? We should learn from our surroundings and the natural graces that we're given there. But I kept my eyes pretty focused on the Word. I kept my eyes
Mm-hmm.
pretty focused on Jesus, and I kept my practices pretty focused on what He does. And I think it's telling of, like, our current culture within the church that someone who's just trying to do what Jesus did looks so different than so many other leaders. But I think that would be maybe some of the reasons why they would say I did it different, is because I wasn't trying to do youth group to maybe like grow a youth group or what other people have done in practice, or, you know, um, I don't know how other youth pastors really do what it is that they do necessarily. Each organization is so different.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, yeah, I never really apologized. I never really tried to persuade people. I never really tried to make something big, or followed a program, and or tried to make students necessarily like me. That really wasn't the goal.
Mm-hmm.
It was about, we're going to follow Jesus,
Yeah.
and we're gonna be iron that sharpens iron, and we're going to be about our business, and we're going to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in today's culture in the church that I start to notice it starts to become more about like filling up a room instead
Mm-hmm.
of preaching the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think it's one of those things that unless you've really sat in the seat of trying to lead a ministry,
Mm-hmm.
maybe reserve your opinions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think a lot of people have opinions that have no willingness to actually jump in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, jump in. You'll figure out that, it's like I was saying before, of like, if you know better, go be better. I learned in a lot of ways I didn't know any better. There's reasons why certain things happen. And there's reasons why people do the things that they do, and don't do the things that maybe we think that they should do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I have been in that realm long enough to understand a lot of the nuances to that. But in a very, I mean, church as a whole is a very broad category. So I know just in my little vein of understanding, what
Mm-hmm.
those things can be. And then I know people generally. And so you can kind of extrapolate, you're not wrong in the sense that like a lot of people are trying to gather, right? A lot of people are trying to appeal. There's no lack of, just like in any other field where there's human beings that exist, there's no lack of insecurities. There's probably somewhat of a higher propensity within church. We're all people who are saved by grace, right? Not by works.
Yeah.
So in a lot of regards, as people who are followers, we're followers for a reason, and part of that reason is because we recognize our inadequacy. If you're not really committed to understanding in the midst of our inadequacy how God redeems our insecurities, right? That he uses oftentimes our dysfunction to display our destiny, right? If some of these things are just kind of quips that we say and not real realities that we live in, then they tend to drive and be motivators, and therefore motivate us to cover our insecurity by gathering a crowd because we're trying to prove some kind of value, because we don't realize that our value comes from the cross, not what we can like quote unquote give to God, which is kind of a funny thing to think about, because like we come to Christianity by the recognition that Jesus is Lord. Lord means he owns it. He owns everything. So you can't give anything to the one who owns everything. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition to contemplate. But ultimately, we do surrender who we are to him. And we're not there to be impressive. We're there to be impressed upon. And when that gets blurry and we're trying to be impressive, and I get caught in this sometimes too, like I'm not removed from any of these things. I'm just kind of aware of them, I guess.
Yeah.
And when we get caught trying to be impressive, I think that's when things can get a little gross. Or we're trying to chase some type of monetary reality. Those are kind of some of my personal sensitivities as a person, for a lot of different reasons. But those are also things that very much like in ministry kind of turn me away from different things. And I have the great grace of having amazing leaders around me, and so I'm surrounded by people who just are motivated by different things, and I think that's why I kind of exist in the ecosystem that I exist in. And it's very particular. I don't think I could exist in a lot of ecosystems. Matter of fact, I know I couldn't. I know that God's been really sovereign in a lot of ways over my journey, and where I am now is definitely a part of that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think awareness to, because you were talking about like how you're not separate from it. Like you still deal with this stuff, but at least you're aware of it. I think awareness is something that's very important. And then also the monetary thing, and that is something I think a lot of people struggle. I struggle with it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do. It's crazy. I was going to ask. So in Matthew 4:19, it's the story of how Andrew and Peter they get called by Jesus, and so Matthew 4:19 says, "And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.'" So I want to ask you, what does that mean to you, that verse?
Well, so obviously the call to follow Jesus is a call to lay down your life. When I think about that verse, it's kind of funny to me because we talk about that verse often. It's obviously Jesus' call to his earliest disciples, and what that means to kind of leave everything and to just turn away from what you know. But also he uses what you know and kind of changes the paradigm of it. It's a different dimension of understanding, right? Peter and Andrew, they understand casting the net for a type of fish. They don't understand casting the net for the kingdom of heaven. And so Jesus is introducing them, and he does this all the time. He uses a similar principle or practical reality to introduce a deeper dimension of that thing. And And if you think about how the Bible actually talks about, the hand of God as an example, well, we understand that, God inhabited humanity in the incarnation through Jesus Christ, but it's not like God as the ethereal reality of the Father is like has a hand.
Mm-hmm.
He's using that imagery so that we would have something to understand him by, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the reality of even how God explains himself and reveals himself is used similarly to this paradigm of something we do understand, bridging us into a paradigm that we cannot yet understand. So in order to step into the next reality of what God has for us, we oftentimes have to leave a previous reality. In order to step into the fullness of our identity, we have to shed our prior identity. Paul will talk about this as he uses the language of we become a new creature in Christ, and as we die to our flesh, and the use of the language of like our sinful nature and how we progress. And so they're being introduced into this opportunity to step into this new identity, to step into this new paradigm. But this is also common language, right? That a rabbi would use. Jesus has just been baptized not long before this in Matthew chapter 3 by his cousin John the Baptist, and he's officially started his ministry. And in that culture, not to get too far into it, but in that culture, when a rabbi would start their ministry, one of the things that they would do is they would call disciples. And it was a great honor in that culture to be called to be the disciple of a rabbi. And while Jesus's, rabbinic process was quite different than the Pharisaical process, and he was a little bit more seen as a little bit more of a rebel for that time. Most people really don't recognize that. But Jesus was known in the Sanhedrin. He was known by the Pharisaical order. We get that from when he was 12 years old and he's in the temple and he's explaining the scriptures and he's growing in wisdom and stature. He's got this experience, like he's known, and it's not a big place, like Jerusalem. This isn't thousands and thousands and thousands of people like we think of today. Like this is small town stuff. So he's really well known, and he kind of goes a different route. He goes out into the wilderness to be baptized by John. There's a reason why John's baptizing people out in the wilderness, and not in the temple. But anyways, the point being is that he kind of starts off his ministry adjacent, and then he calls his disciples to him. And in that culture, you would drop everything, to take that. It was a completely different thing. It was a huge sacrifice in a way, but the sacrifice was understood that it was a huge privilege to be called. And I think one of the things that it, to make it very practical for like you and I, and back to the question of like, what does this mean? Well, we've been called, but we haven't been called just by a rabbi. We haven't been called by a great mentor. We haven't been called by an influential person alone. Like we've been called by God, right? We've been called by God to follow him and to step into these different paradigms, even though we don't have any idea what that means. They didn't know what the term I'll teach you to be fishers of. They didn't know what he was talking about. You get all the way to John chapter 14, and Jesus is still saying these things that are very ominous and very abstract somewhat. And I love Thomas. I know we're talking about Peter and Andrew, but like to fast forward a little bit, Thomas is just this, he gets a bad rap, man, because he doubted or whatever. Thomas was a real dude. Like Thomas was the guy who he would just say it for what it was. So Jesus was like, I go to my Father's house, prepare a place for you. There are many rooms. Surely you know. And like Thomas is like, actually, we have no idea what you're talking about. And we haven't known what you're talking about. Can you please be plain? Right? Like, we don't know the way.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, where we get the famous, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Yeah. No one comes to the Father except for me. And this most explicit statement of Jesus' deity comes on the heels of Thomas's most direct question of this, like, bro, we don't know what you're talking about. And I think this is something too, that's just like practical. This is something I try to practice a lot. Maybe going back a little bit to the different, like what made me different, or what my students would say like made me different. I always try to hit people in the forehead, right? So what that means is, and this is something I see Jesus do a lot with using language like this, using something that, yes, it's similar, but you don't actually necessarily know what he's talking about. There's a principle of learning that's found in this. And I call it hitting people in the forehead, meaning I don't want to just hit you at your eye level. Like, I don't just want to tell you things that you already know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not helpful. Like, repetition is the mother of all learning, in a way, but really curiosity matters more, right? Not to get too far into things, but like most of our educational understanding comes from the public education system. All right, we don't actually teach in the public education system. You learn a process called temporal cognitive recall. It's where you just repeat something until it becomes ingrained, and then you can understand the question on the test to the point where you can. All right, there's a map for learning that's in there, but like if you look back at like the great teachers of the world, like Socrates comes to mind. He did things very, very differently, and you see this actually with Jesus and some of his principles. I'm convinced why he used language like this. Because he was like, hey, I'll meet you. I'm not going to go over your head, right? I'm not going to just completely introduce a concept to you that just goes way over the top. I'm not going to meet you at eye level, but I'm going to hit you in the forehead. I'm going to give you this level of intrigue. So I think that's somewhat revealed in there too. And I've always tried to do that. Like I've always tried to I'm not going to ratchet this concept up too high. But I'm not exactly just going to try to tell you things that you know and that are comfortable either, because Jesus just did it different. And so that's all kind of in there for me. And then, just the obvious nature of what it means to be called by God. Like it's a great honor. It's a big deal. And who are we? Like what is my life? Like I'm not like this special person. I've always kind of been like a really good number two. I've always been a really good backup. And so to be called by God, to be put on the team, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And by the way, you do a really good job of hitting people in the forehead.
I have a lot of people tell me that.
Because every time you and I talk, it's not like I'm hearing the same stuff. It's like it just goes a little bit deeper, and it's not too much, but it gives me something to think about, and then take back to the men's group or discuss it with other people. So I want to go in on how, because you were talking about how Jesus takes what you already know and kind of like shifts you into this other life whenever you get called. How do you take that step? How do you take that step to say, all right, now I'm being called in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's and it's funny because my answer is that you go right, and you go all in, right. Like this is the thing that I think maybe, I don't know if it bugs me. I just don't necessarily know how to wrap my head around doing things with a reservation, doing ultimate things with a reservation. There's no reservation. You just go all in. And what does that mean practically? I don't know, man. For me, it meant that it didn't matter what was in store. It didn't matter what God gave to me or took away from me. It didn't matter. I didn't have anything necessarily to begin with. I wasn't anything great. I think that's part of the problem that most people have, is that they think they're good. It's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than a camel to fit through the eye of a needle. Whether you take that as an actual sewing needle, or you take that as the side of the gate, right, where the camel would have to kneel down, that act of humility and going low, whichever one it is, it's an impossible reality, right? And the impossibility is, I think, oftentimes we think so much of ourselves that we're going to lose something by surrendering to Jesus more fully, or we're good enough, we're resourced enough in and of ourselves that we don't really need him. And so we're only going to go to him when we perceive a need from him, and we go to him to get from him, as opposed to we go to him to sacrifice to him.
Mm.
Right? So the relationship that we have with God is always that we're not adding things by sacrificing to him, we're acknowledging his worthiness by giving our right worship to him. And it's interesting because I find it both in this example that you're using in Matthew 4 and in just practical everyday life, especially whenever it comes to like even like what we were talking about earlier with church, is like so much of our journey is a genuine unknown search for value. Right? So like dropping their nets would mean they're losing their source of income. Mm-hmm. Gathering crowds in a church is, and oftentimes the acquisition of monetary reality is oftentimes a search for value. Mm-hmm. All these things that we do, they're connected to value in some way. You don't find your value until you recognize God's. Mm-hmm. It's not your self-esteem. Your self-esteem isn't going to get you anywhere. Your brain doesn't know the difference between thinking about yourself and suffering. It's the same neurological pathway.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's why a self-centered reality is a recipe for disaster, because your brain's even wired in such a way. Like it's why, like, you know, I'm not. I'll never disparage like therapy, but if it's a self-centered therapy, it's not going to get you anywhere. Mm-hmm. You know, if your goals in life are about you, you can gather whatever things. You know how many millionaires I know that are unbelievably just existentially tired. Mm. They're unfulfilled. They are the least joyful people I know. I mean, even the statistics show this pretty clearly. Like the rate of suicide amongst millionaires is very high. What's behind that? Well, what's behind that is I got all the things, and it still doesn't satisfy me. Why? Because you chasing you is never going to satisfy you. Mm-hmm. It's only our fulfillment and our satisfaction is only sustained in God. Mm-hmm. I mean, I like nice things just as much as the next guy, but things are things, dude. Yeah. You know, things come, things go. Things break, things disappoint, things change. Things are things. Mm-hmm. God is consistent. And God is the only thing that sustains the weight of our worship. It's too heavy for anything else. We'll crush everything. And so, especially if we put ourselves at the center of it, the outcome of self-centrality is suffering, because they're technically the same. And our brains are even wired to understand that way. And so, you know, it's this oftentimes search for value, and it's trying to prove to ourselves that we are valuable because we don't recognize a specific centralized principle. And that is what realizing value is. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I know this is a little bit off topic, but let's go down a rabbit hole real quick, because actualized value is a big deal, right? So there's a difference between perceived value and actualized value. I'll use this example. So if I put my home on the market tomorrow, you understand real estate to a degree, right? But this is a big principle. But if I put my home on the market tomorrow for, I don't know, $5 million. Okay, I could put my home on the market. There's nothing stopping me from being able to do that. I don't think. Maybe there is. I don't know. But the problem is going to become very quickly that I have I don't know, it's like a 3,700 square foot home in Olathe, Kansas, on a regular plot of land, and it's surrounded by other homes that are like anywhere from $400,000 to $550,000, right? Mm-hmm. So what's the likelihood someone's going to buy that property for $5 million?
They're not going to.
They're not going to. So I can have a perceived reality of $5 million. The problem is that no one's going to be willing to pay the $5 million. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the perceived value doesn't have the same weight as actualized value. Actualized value is what someone is willing to pay, right? Okay, that becomes a very important principle when we understand the cost that heaven was willing to pay for you and I.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So your value and my value from an ultimate level isn't what we can get
Mm-hmm.
on this earth. It's what God was willing to pay to purchase us.
Mm-hmm.
And that cost was Jesus. That is the ultimate value.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, our value doesn't come from our comparative reality. It comes from the cross.
Mm.
That's the down payment. And that's actually the language that Jesus uses on the cross when he says, it is finished. That word, tetelestai, in Greek, it means it is finished, but it was oftentimes used as a stamp for the payment of debt.
Mm.
Now, there's a second side to this coin, though, because it's not just that Jesus paid our debt, and that is a realization of our value. I think it's Colossians 3, it's also mentioned in Ephesians 2. Paul writes that we have been reconciled to God in Christ. What does that mean? Well, reconciliation is a term of value as well. And this is very, very important because it means that not only is our value that we've been made sinless because of the cross, but it also means that everything that Jesus has, he gives to us through propitiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's called theology, we call it the great exchange. And in that, it's not just that everything that separates us from God is removed from us, it's everything that Jesus has is also added to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that we've been reconciled, and Paul uses this language very specifically. We've been reconciled to God. So in accounting terms, when you reconcile an account, you bring it to a point of integrity. You bring the balance line to equal the same value.
Mm-hmm.
So being reconciled to God is an insane statement.
Yeah.
That means that Christ has put in us the same value to us as God has for himself. Now, we have to be very careful with that concept because that's graced to us. And Paul will address this by using language. If we've been grafted in, we can be grafted out, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a point of arrogance,
Yeah.
but it is a point of confidence, which means that it really doesn't matter what this world's definition of me is, or what your definition can matter to me, and I should understand it and learn from how I operate with people that I'm around. But ultimately, your definition isn't the defining reality. It's God's.
Mm-hmm.
And that definition's been settled in Christ. And if I have that, then I can have all the confidence in the world with whatever situation that I'm in.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's having the confidence and also just gratitude for it.
Yeah.
I think that's gratitude is something that I've missed, that a lot of people have missed.
Well, you'll notice too something that is kind of interesting to me. I mean, it makes sense logically. People who are arrogant they're oftentimes very ungrateful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's kind of like I've got really good friends who were at some level or another sales operators, or let's just say very, very capable in taking life away from someone. And you'll notice, man, like they're not anxious people. They don't walk into a room scared.
And hold their own.
And you'll be surprised, how often they avoid conflict.
Mm-hmm.
They don't engage because they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not like, I don't know one person who was a SEAL operator who would ever pick a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all more than ready to get in one if absolutely necessary, but only if absolutely necessary. So it's kind of a similar principle in that, when you're confident, it's different. And I think practically confidence is a big deal. I think it's a very big question mark in our culture. especially for men. And I think that's because we don't have a practical definition or division between what is arrogance and what is confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And confidence comes from truth,
Mm-hmm.
like not your opinion of truth, not facts. Those things can be relative. Truth is not relative. This is the thing that people get messed up all the time. Truth is not relative. Like your opinion of what truth is versus my opinion. Truth doesn't need an opinion. It's not opinion oriented. But it's also not, and I'll use a technical term, sorry to kind of take this into a different concept real quick, but it's an important one because of confidence and how we engage with it. But we've trapped ourselves into an empirical system of understanding. And that I think has a technical glitch in it.
Mm-hmm.
So empiricism is just like scientific method, right? And it lacks a metaphysics. It lacks an understanding. So when we talk about confidence, it's like, okay, reverse engineer that and boil it down like it were a dish. Mm-hmm. And so what are the ingredients of confidence? And we can kind of do that to some extent, but at some point that kind of peters out because confidence and some of these more abstract concepts can't be empirically defined. And so just like we have this huge question of like, who are you? Mm-hmm. Like that's a giant question that you're searching for. And oftentimes we search for it in business. So oftentimes we search for it in our achievements. Oftentimes we search for it in these tangible things. And then it doesn't satisfy us. And so then we're left with this existential crisis. And I think that's because we're trying to define things empirically where it can't be defined empirically. Truth is one of those things. Truth is not an empirical definition. Truth is a metaphysical definition. And I can say that very clearly because of Jesus' declaration of, I am the way, the truth, the life. Mm-hmm. And so we don't define truth based off of what. Mm-hmm. We define truth based off of who. And you're going to have to fight with that, and so do I, because we adopt lies onto our identity all the time. And the adoption of lies onto our identity is devastating to us because it's not who we are. But we don't have a deep understanding of the truth of who we are as well. And confidence is linked to truth. Arrogance is always linked to lies or inflammatory facts. We inflate things, and it causes this arrogant disposition. Mm-hmm. And I say that because so many people are very practically confused. Like if you present as confident, most people are going to just think you're arrogant. Mm-hmm. And I think in a genuine way, true confidence is that you humbly, right? Again, because where truth exists, humility exists. Because it's a link between open-mindedness and truth. Like if I know truth, I can be open-minded because nothing's going to shake truth. Like it's impenetrable. Yeah. So I don't have to worry about what you say or what you believe or what your opinion is today. That's going to change, by the way, because truth isn't going to change. Mm-hmm. And so I think that truth and that confidence that comes through it has embedded within it the humility to just keep taking the steps regardless of your opinion of me. Mm-hmm. Like your opinion, again, it matters, but it's not definitive. I know who I am. And there's a deep-rooted confidence in that. And what I've found is that there's also, because of that humility, there's an embrace of patience. Which means it doesn't matter if you come around to understanding me or not. Mm-hmm. But I'll wait. I'm willing to wait and be consistent. And through that, you'll either double down on your opinion, and that'll become your perspective that's void of actual reality. Mm-hmm. And therefore kind of undoes itself. But you have an opinion, you want to stick to it. No, okay, whatever. And oftentimes the fun thing that I found is that that kind of shoos you out of my purview. Mm-hmm. You don't last long. Yeah. But then those that the individuals that do or that I get to be around are influenced for long periods of time and years. Mm-hmm. It creates an amazing space where we can grow together in understanding that confidence in real time. And that becomes so important because when achievements are actualized, not in search of value, but from a foundation of value, those things are transformative. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm not building a company so that I can pay my bills and have a yacht or a boat or whatever. I'm not acquiring things. I'm creating an environment so that the reality of human potential can be realized in a tangible way. Because I can say these words, and that's fun. And I can reverse engineer this and maybe make it make sense through the use of language. But that's something totally different than, and oftentimes gets missed, versus, okay, is that you're going to come work for me and I'm going to take you from this stage, which is meeting your needs, to this stage, and I'm going to show you the path of progression so that you can see the steps clearly on what it means to walk out your potential. That's something that changes lives.
Yeah.
It's these words, though, that I'm saying in action, and that's what I found in when I did business before, and I found it in different ways, as I've done ministry. But that's really what it's always been. Sorry, I know I took a lot of rabbit trails and tried to kind
You're
of tie
good.
them in there.
This is awesome. I love it. You always make me think every single time, so I appreciate it.
Well, I like people who think, and I learned a long time ago. I preach every now and again, and probably about the third time I preached at my church, a guy came up to me and said, "Man, you really make me think." And I was like, "Thank you." And I walked away from that, and my wife goes, "He didn't mean that as a compliment, right?" And I was like, "No, I didn't know that actually, but I can understand." So I like people who like to think, but I know that not everybody does.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody the other day, and they were telling me about how they had a intern and how they thought that they knew everything. And I said, for me, like, I know I'm going to get humbled at some point.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to learn, and I'm open to, if I think one way, I'm open to hearing what other people have to say. But just like you, I always go back to the truth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, man. It's just being a student of life is, it's just a better way. Have way more questions than you have conclusions. Because just the stuff that we don't know is absurd. And I get pinned in this weird circle now, or this weird corner now, where people ask me a lot of questions. And I can definitely appreciate that. And I love the opportunity to teach. But really, at my core, like, I'm a question asker, not a question answerer. And some of the things that I do have more answers to, or what I would say, like, sometimes what other people would describe as a deeper understanding. I don't think it's necessarily very deep, but I think in comparison to other people, it is. Like, I've never considered myself a smart person. And the reason I don't consider myself a smart person is because if I took all of knowledge and then compared what percentage of that I have very little. Very, very little. Now, if I took what knowledge I have compared to you or someone else, we play that spectrum of the playing field, sure. But that's a dumb game to play, in my opinion, when there's so much. And so therefore, I like to just be able to sit around and be curious and to learn. But oftentimes that puts me, at a table with a book with somebody asking me questions. And so it's,
Hey.
I try to just play the field as best I can.
Yeah, we were, so during my men's group on Wednesday, we're going through Proverbs right now.
Okay.
And I believe it was Proverbs 18 is what we went over.
Oh, Proverbs 18 is crazy.
And a lot in that chapter is talking about not using as much words and listening more. And
wisdom personified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked the guys, one of the questions was, what kind of, because the group is about basically like, okay, how do we bend our knee to Jesus and become the biblical men that he calls us to be? And I asked him, I was like, okay, so what kind of mindset should us as men, what kind of mindset do we need? And humility was one of them.
Yeah.
And then I said submission is the other one. I think that can kind of go back into like how whenever you are called, like, I love how you basically correct me if I'm wrong, is what you said is we were created um, to worship God, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And just realizing that and submitting to that,
Mm-hmm.
submitting to whatever God has for your life.
Well, let me say a few things just real quick, if I
Yeah,
may.
for sure.
So I think the interesting thing about these realities is that they're non-negotiable. Like you're going to worship something,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't matter. Like something is going to disciple you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably an algorithm somewhere. It's probably some money-driven, reverse engineered psychological reality that's made to make you its little toy and do whatever it is. And I worked in marketing for a long time, and it's not that hard to get you to do something. It's not that hard to get you to act. Right? Like there's ways that we understand how to influence people, right? And so something is going to disciple you. You're going to worship something, period. I always find it funny, like the term atheist is a really interesting term because it's not real. It's just a misunderstanding of practical. So, it comes from Greek, atheo, right? So it's a as a negating reality to whatever comes next. So agnostic would mean without knowledge, gnosis. Uh, Atheistic is without God, right? That term misunderstands the term, or more importantly, the title God so significantly. So God is just a title, like president. President is a title. It doesn't become personalized until you attach a name onto it, right? So then you have President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, President Trump. Then it becomes personalized. Well, God is just a title. God is whatever you worship. Whatever you worship is what you give your time, talent, or treasure to. Well, so those things more than likely are going, they're really only going one of two directions. It's either going to God or to you. The problem is with you are chaotic. And so then what you worship changes all the time. But it's non-negotiable. You're going to more than likely wind up serving the opinions of someone else that you're trying to interpret, which is impossible to do because you actually have no faculty to accurately understand someone else's opinion of you with genuine accuracy. Part of the reason is because other people don't think about you that much. We spend so much time thinking about how other people think about us, and it's so arrogant because other people really don't think about you that much.
Yeah.
Wild to think about, but very true. So don't spend your time trying to play a guessing game that's actually impossible and put your brain in a state of immediate anxiety because you're trying to process information you can't possibly process and trying to satisfy that. And instead, and the Bible would use this language in Romans 12:2, in places like 2 Corinthians 10:4, where Paul would talk about like the renewing of our mind, right? Putting our mind on Christ. For the weapons of our warfare, he makes it militant in 2 Corinthians. For the weapons of our warfare, they're not carnal, they're mighty in God. For the pulling down of strongholds, casting out of imaginations. It's exactly what I just said. Taking every thought captive unto the obedience of Christ. Going back to your point of humility and wisdom and submission. Right? There's very deep realities to all of these things that, again, are just non-negotiable. They're just usually pointed in the wrong direction. So we're giving the energy, period. It's just going into nothingness or it's going into God. And that has everything to do with our fulfillment and our purpose. Right? So many people, the suicide rate among young men is not going down. The suicide rate in general is not going down, but especially not among young men. It's at all-time highs. Why is that? Well, because we can extrapolate that this is pointless. What my hourly job that takes my work, my time rather, that I'm not going to get back to give me $14 for that hour that I'll never have again, and to do that into infinitude. or to go through this system that's just going to give me a piece of paper and a ton of debt and load me down, or whatever the outcome is. Or even, I love the way that Jim Carrey said it. He said, I hope that everybody, this is a loose quote, but he says, I hope everybody fulfills their greatest hopes and dreams so that they'll know how disappointing it is at the end. You get what you want, and then you learn. It goes back to what we were saying earlier about like the millionaires who are disappointed. It's like you have an imagination of what you want, but the real adventure is the call that Abraham had. Come, follow me. Where are we going? I'll show you when we get there.
Yeah.
And this is the great adventure of our lives. And this is what makes life meaningful. And at the end, what you find is that it's not about me at all. It's about what can I give. In the book of Malachi, God says, "Test me in this, in giving." Well, yes, you can. People make that about money. It's not about money. Why? Because the ROI with God is very unique. What you invest in rarely is what you take out. I'll use a weird example. So, like, I spent 15 years of my life serving. Well, I spent 17 years of my life serving students, right? Teenagers, doing youth group stuff, doing it different. We didn't play a lot of games, man. Very few games, dude. And I hate youth camp. But I spent that time doing that. And what I learned was like, man, I spent so much time with students. I spent so much time with teenagers. I spent so much time with parents. But the most important thing in my world is my home. It's my wife and my 2 kids. And I was in Georgia one year at this conference, and they asked me, what's the most important, outside of following Jesus, what's the most important thing about your life? And that's an easy question to answer. And I said, okay, what have you done have you seen God move in those areas of your life? And I had to think about that for a really long time. And what I landed on was that all of those years that I spent doing that, following the call that God had on my life, fulfilled the 2 most important areas of my life, which was my marriage and my parenting. But why? Well, there's no more honest fruit of a marriage than a teenager. There just isn't. It does not lie, man. And I learned so many lessons about marriage by walking with teenagers, because I saw what certain actions produce. I saw the consequence. If you do this, this is what it produces. And if you don't do this, this is what it produces. And I saw how to navigate my marriage based off of that. And then how does that work with my kid? Well, I saw, okay, well, if this is what you do with a kid when they're 2 and when they're 5 and when they're 7 and when they're 8, this is what it produces. This is how that outcome, or how that the consequence of this action is this. And, for me, it was always like, I want to be a good father. That was I didn't care what I did to make money. I wanted to be a good dad, and I learned in order to be a good dad, I had to be a good husband first. And I had to be a better husband than you will never be a better parent than you are spouse. And you'll never be a better spouse than you are a person who understands how they're loved. And you will never understand how you're loved apart from the infinite love of God that was portrayed on the cross. So anyway, that's all to say, like, that ROI, I put in 1.5 decades, almost 2 decades of serving students, and out of it I got an amazing family. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it's like, we don't give just to get, but try and outgive God with your life. Give your life away. There you will find purpose, because you're not giving it to people. You're giving it to God, and He is life. So you'll never be able, like, you give with one hand and you receive twice as much with the other hand, but it doesn't you put in money, it's not like you get money out. You put money in, you get purpose out. But that principle of purposefulness is difficult. Like, it's tough,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to find it. Because, like, what's it worth to you? Well, for a lot of people, they feel worthless because they don't have purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So get busy, find it. For me, it was like, okay, if I'm 66 books and however many pages this is away from understanding purpose,
Mm-hmm.
fine. That's a task, man.
Yeah.
Because this thing isn't like a Rubik's Cube, it's a tesseract.
Yeah.
The Old Testament weaves into the New Testament, the New Testament weaves into the Old Testament. Through it, you don't learn knowledge, you learn intimacy with God.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about intellect.
Yeah.
It's wild, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a million different ways to approach it. But if that's what's standing in between me and fulfillment, let's go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If letting go of my net is what is in the way of me walking in purposefulness,
Mm-hmm.
burn it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I say that. Peter didn't. It's funny, after Jesus dies and before they see him on the shore, where are they?
Mm-hmm. Right back on the sea.
He ain't let go of that boat, bro.
Mm-hmm.
He just let it go for them.
Yeah.
So we're all imperfect at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing I think that people get hung up on way too much. They're unwilling to do stuff because they feel like they're not perfect at it. And yeah, you're not.
Yeah.
You probably suck at it, especially in comparison to somebody else. Doesn't really matter, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are graced for what you are willing to embrace. And you are never graced before you're willing to embrace it. Get in.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. Yeah, you're not good enough. You're never going to be good enough. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
That's the cross. That's the reason it exists. Like, oh, if you want to be good enough, just do what 637 Levitical laws perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Have that.
No.
Go ahead. You ain't gonna do it.
Mm-mm.
Why? Because you need a savior. You need grace. It's a necessary component.
Yeah.
Why is grace necessary? Because you can't. So receive the gift. How do you receive the gift? Get in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Stop screwing around and complaining. No one's here to save you.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus made the way. Take it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you don't like the route because it's exclusive doesn't mean that doesn't make it inclusive also.
Mm.
Like when Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," that is a statement of exclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying I'm a way, I'm a truth. None of that. It's the.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's exclusivity. Now the problem with that though is people want to always balk on the fact that of the exclusivity. Well, the problem with that is that it's also inclusive. If I tell you how to get somewhere and there's only one way to get there, it doesn't mean you don't know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that's the route, Jack.
Yep.
And that's the route.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah. I I was listening to you, and I think something I thought of is whenever you are leading, whether it be in family, whether it be whatever, like you have to be led by Christ in order to lead.
Yeah.
And I always try and tell all the guys that in the group. So I wanted to ask you what what do you see that people miss when they're starting a business or they've been running one for a long time? What do you see that they miss?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, practical answers are like low hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Practical answers are you recognize like pattern recognition.
Mm-hmm.
I did door to door sales originally,
Mm-hmm.
and the product that we were dealing with, the person could spit out an objection a million different ways, but it always boiled down to the same 4 or 5 things.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever watch Glengarry Glen Ross, there's some things that, like, one of the characters never will negotiate price because it's like, you're not actually asking me about price. So we're talk about like cost and value. They're two different animals, right? Really, if anybody's ever talking to you about cost, they're not talking about cost. They don't see value. Why don't they see value? Because you're not building value. So you need to get better at building value. which means that sometimes you need to understand what makes something valuable. And a lot of times people aren't willing to recognize that is because they're not willing to recognize they don't actually have anything that they're offering that's unique value, that's novel. And then you got to go back to the drawing board. And I think the principle between that, to answer your question very specifically, is those are all kind of consequences of a deeper reality. If you don't perceive value in a thing, or you're not, one of the things that you're missing is you're not achieving the goal, whatever your goal is. Number one, maybe your goal is too high. And I see people do that all the time. They have an ambitious goal that has no root in reality. But oftentimes that is like an outcome of personalized arrogance. Like they don't see things with sober minds because they just kind of get caught on a path of this is what it's going to be. And then that leads to disappointment, and that disappointment leads to failing. Right.
Yeah.
But that's an internal thing. That's an outgrowth of arrogance. So I see that people lack a personalized value. They're, again, doing something in order to prove their value to themselves. They're not doing things from a place of value. Right? It's like, I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to prove this to myself. Not, I have this and I realize this. Because when you come at things, when that's genuine and that's real, now that takes a lot of heart surgery. Those are easy words to say, man.
Yeah.
But the other thing I find that stops people from that is they don't understand that confidence and insecurity lives in the same house. They're bunkmates, bro. Just because you're confident doesn't mean you don't have insecurities. It's not that you've eradicated insecurities. I have not eradicated all my insecurities. I'm an insecure person just like anybody else. It doesn't mean I don't have confidence too. Right?
Yeah.
And so I see people trying to get to a place that's unachievable to begin. That's something that's huge. It's like, I got to do this and I got to do this and I got to do this. And it's like, yeah, none of those things actually have anything to do with achieving the goal. None of those things have anything to do with understanding. We live in a world that information is so right there. That's another thing, though, that I think becomes complicated. It's paralysis by analysis. There's so much information. Where do I start? There's so many options. What do I do? There's the jack of all trades, master of none effect. Pick a lane.
Yeah.
And what I've always told people is, pick a lane that's pointed to purpose. How do you understand purpose? Oftentimes where your skills and your passions intersect. You can be passionate about something and suck at it. I love certain forms of music. I could not pick up a guitar, play it, and God knows I'm not finna sing. Okay? I can be passionate about something and have no skill associated to it. Now, I can also be skilled with something. I've won a lot of national competitions doing art. Okay? Ton of skill. Okay? As I've grown older, I've found creative endeavors that have left the canvas. Right? And so my passion for it's less. Probably not purpose. You got to find where those two things intersect. And what I find is that two things on that route. Number one, we downplay our skills because we want to, we don't want to lean in. I have a natural proclivity to draw. I could draw before I could speak. And I have a very high verbal acuity. So I learned how to speak very early. But my visual acuity is way different. It's off the charts different.
Oh, wow.
And so that developed first. If I were born today, they definitely would have been like, this guy's autistic. Like, it just would have been a thing. Because I could draw before I could talk. And I could draw, not like I could pick up a pencil or a pen. And like I could draw your face in a way that you could recognize you on the paper. And then that turned into, I did hyperrealism and, like I said, won a bunch of awards and all that jazz, which is great. But like that skill taught me, it grew. And so there's this open-mindedness that comes when we embrace the skill, number one. And then number two, when we're willing to take something that we're kind of good at or kind of naturally inclined towards and put all our effort into it. Again, ton of humility to do that. Because if you're good, you're just good. And then you don't practice and you don't develop the discipline. they have to marry.
Yeah.
If you're given a natural gift, put all your effort into it and develop that gift with a massive amount of discipline. And then the second thing to it is passion. And I think there's so much, I don't know, man, like it's kind of like this like fad to just be apathetic,
Mm-hmm.
to just be, and it's lazy is what it is. It's, I don't want to feel feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I don't want to, like, it's easier to be depressed because it takes no mental energy. Now, I'm not trying to dog on, like, I've been through clinical anxiety, I've been through clinical depression, I've been through PTSD diagnoses. Like, I understand these things and what they are, but we have to also address the fact that there is a reality of mental laziness that is embedded in that. Because everything that you can be apathetic towards, you can also be passionate towards. You just have to put more effort into the passion part. And we want effort to be without, we want passion to be without effort. And it's just not. Like that I don't know where that kind of lie comes from, is that we're just innately passionate. And I'm sorry, just no. Like there's an effort towards that, meaning everything that you can be, like in life, you don't have to put forth any effort to be ungrateful. Like you just wake up and be pissed about your situation. You can wake up and find the cynicism. You don't have to put any effort into that.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can take 1 degree of effort and land in gratitude. Right. And so I see a lot of apathy coming in and ruining a lot of people's drive and ruining a lot of people's potential in their business pursuit and tanking them because they're unwilling to just shift their focus and see things different, because it doesn't justify their, a lot of people do business, like go out and start a business because they don't want to work for someone else. And that has some fire in it, you know what I mean? That has some tells, because that could be because you have a really unique idea, that could be because you have a really unique disposition, but we're probably going to have a very different conversation than why is my company failing or why am I failing. You may go through that internal dialogue, but you're probably, if you're that kind of a person, going to find pretty quickly, oh, I need to look at things differently. If you're failing as a pattern, it's usually because you lack personal discipline, and that's probably also why you don't want to work for someone. And so it's like a lot of it goes back to what the Lord just is doing with this whole thing, which is like, hey, no, this isn't about everything else. I'm trying to get you to a space where you're living in the truth of who I know you to be more. I'm developing you in your potential. And too many people just tap out.
Yeah. It's all about serving, and that's what my mind went to when you said the last part. Is we want so much stuff for ourselves, because for me, I went out on my own because I didn't want to work for anybody, and a lot of people do. And then you get to a point where you're like, that's not going to take you the entire way.
Yeah.
And so now you have to find a mission, a purpose. And for me, and that has been serving. So Mark 10:45, for the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve,
and give his life as a ransom for many.
Yeah. And that is, for me personally, that's something that I'm working through right now. Like with wholesaling, like I'm trying to figure out, another thing is like heart posture. Like trying to figure out, okay, am I doing this? Because to be honest, I can't remember the last time I was trying to help a seller just out of the kindness of my heart and servant, in a servant mindset.
Yeah.
It's always been a look at the deal, look at the money. And so that's where I've realized that the Lord is definitely working on my heart in that area. But now I also have this, I don't know what you would call it. It's something I'm very passionate, the men's group.
Yeah.
And that is in all honesty, I'm letting the Lord lead it. I don't know where it's gonna go. I don't know where, because I just stopped working with the guy I was working with
Mm-hmm.
because I felt that the Lord was calling me to come out on my own again.
Sure.
And so now it's I've kind of let go of the reins. I'm like, Lord, lead my life.
Sure. Yeah.
And that is something that I think for me, a lot of people are very much afraid to do so. I was afraid.
Well, that's what I mean by like your grace for what you're willing to embrace. You know, you're way more resilient than what you could ever give yourself credit for. It doesn't mean you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't mean that like, you know, but yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, like your disposition and situation is very different than anything that I've personally experienced. I was, you know, I was in high school, graduated high school, went to work. You know, had uh, responsibilities immediately with, you know, I was 19 years old when my now wife got pregnant with our oldest daughter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I was a kid, and then I had a kid. You know, I've always had huge pressure.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing about huge pressure is, and this kind of goes to your point, I think that so many people don't realize their potential for the same reason they don't get big in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody wants to get big, but nobody wants to lift heavy weights.
Mm-hmm.
Big pressure produces big results.
Yeah.
Because it has to.
Yeah.
Because if not, you die.
Mm-hmm.
If not, you hurt. If and when it's you, yeah, okay, whatever. You know, I think especially as guys, we're kind of like a little haphazard sometimes, and we're like, if I get hurt, whatever. But when you have people behind you and you can't get hurt, or it hurts them, that's a different fire.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And you learn how resilient you are. You learn how capable you can be when you're in pressure. And I think so many people don't achieve because they're unwilling to get under the load of the pressure. And man, get there. You know, don't put yourself in a space that is like dangerous. Like, you know, long gone are the days where I'm gonna get up underneath a squat rack with 650 pounds on my back. I've been there though. You know, like it's just not beneficial for my space of life. Like the last time I squatted over 500 pounds, my wife just said, "Why, dude? Like, why? Like you don't play football anymore, bro." And I'm like, "Yeah, she's not wrong." She actually banned me from doing anything over 315 with a bar, period. Which I'm grateful for. But dude, 18 reps with 315 pounds is no joke, bro. Like it just because it's less weight doesn't mean the reps don't like hurt.
Yeah.
You know, because 315 pounds is always 315 pounds, and it doesn't. You know, the point of it is like, what can you do? Because you know, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
And like that's very true. Life is a matter. This always freaked me out. So I worked. I had a contract where I taught doctors. Like it was the weirdest thing I ever did in my life because I didn't even go to college. And I'm like, I have this 1-year contract, get paid.
What's going on, guys? I know I just had to leave you on a cliffhanger there, but if you guys want more, please like, subscribe, share. There will be a part 2 with Royce coming in the future, and there's going to be many more people that are going to be on the podcast. So this guy, if this helped you, if this encouraged you, inspired you, please share. I'd love to see how the Lord is working in your guys' lives. I know this really impacted me and continues to do so. So if you guys like it, please share it. And God bless. Thank you, guys.